Hi, Rich Leiter here, and welcome to my channel, The Naked Booktuber. Okay, I just finished listening to a short video by a woman who titled her own video, "It Took Me 50 Years and Losing Almost Everything to Realize What I'll Tell You in 10 Minutes." And she basically talks about how she was taking life for granted for many, many years, for 50 years, and then she became ill, very ill. She doesn't specify what kind of an illness she had, but just that she became devastatingly ill. And then she suddenly realized that she had been taking life for granted, and she goes on about the different things that she's learned in the wake of her illness, and she's sharing her insights with us. And this is a very, very obviously heartfelt video. And I listened to the whole thing carefully, and I'm not by any means trying to denigrate it at all. I agree with everything she's saying. And I was thinking of actually writing a comment back, but there were already 357 comments, and I doubt she would see mine, and I also doubt that just because it would be lost in the crowd, and also I think I'm kind of shadow banned, and a lot of my comments on different podcasts don't even show up, so I figure let me at least make my own podcast, and at least I know it'll appear on the internet, right? And so here's what I was thinking or feeling when I listened to this podcast, and what I wanted to say to this woman. Not in a negative or critical way, but just in an honest way, how I was feeling about it. And what I'm feeling about is this. My first reaction to her video was, well, obviously, the things that you're telling us in your podcast about how we shouldn't be taking life for granted, I'm quite sure are the same kinds of things that you probably that you have yourself been told for the first 50 years of your life, and yet it didn't really have any impact on you. So what makes you think that your podcast is going to have any impact on us? I mean, the only reason that you realize now that you were taking life shockingly and shamelessly for granted is because of your devastating illness. That and that alone is the only thing that really woke you up to all of the profound insights that you're giving us. Nothing short of that. If somebody had gone up to you and said, "Don't take life for granted," and you were healthy, and you would have agreed with them, but it wouldn't have really meant anything to you, and you would have gone on living your life in which you were taking things for granted. It's kind of just the way people are, human beings are. I mean, I've heard lots of things to the same effect in my 70 plus odd years, and it never changed my life. The advice, the heartfelt advice that was given to me never changed me. The only thing that changed me was experience, was going through something, just like the only thing that changed this woman was her actually getting sick and going through it herself. Everything else, short of that, is kind of going to fall on deaf ears. So, well, I guess what I'm saying is you really can't communicate your profoundly felt wisdom that you have acquired or accrued over a lifetime. You really can't communicate that to another human being, sadly. That person has to go through and experience themselves in order to change. But just reading, listening to somebody talk about it, I'm pretty sure is not going to do very much for you. It may affect you momentarily, it may affect you for a few hours, but eventually the insight or the wisdom is going to fade, and you're going to keep on living your old life, taking everything for granted. It's just the way that human beings are constructed. So if I know something, if I have truly experienced something and I have some kind of a wisdom, I've changed my life in some way due to some kind of a tragedy or some kind of suffering, which this woman obviously has. How exactly am I to communicate that to another person if I want to? And I've come to the conclusion that you can't. I think that almost all parents realize that. Parents cannot communicate their wisdom to children. I see that in my own life. You really can't. You can give them advice, but you cannot give them wisdom which you have accrued through bitter experience. It just really isn't possible. And that's unfortunate. That's tragic. So you can't do that. That's what I'm saying. Now, what I'm really saying also is a lot of people say stuff which sounds great. They say stuff like, live for today, or stop and smell the roses. They say things which are cliched sentiments. Now they themselves may actually mean it, like this woman obviously means it. She obviously, I have no doubt this woman actually means it very deeply when she says, don't take life for granted. Stop and smell the roses. Seize the moment. Don't worry so much about the future. She obviously does feel this, and this is quite true. But the way she's saying it, it sounds like a cliche, even though there's a kernel of profound wisdom within it. And there are a lot of people in life who mouth cliches, and they don't really mean what they say. A lot of people I've met in life, as I'm sure you have also, who say, you got to stop and smell the roses. Don't take life for granted. Live every moment. But even the people who are saying this, I'm not talking about this woman now, but a lot of people I've met who say this, they don't really mean it. They're just saying something which sounds good, which they feel they're supposed to say. It's like a knee-jerk, rote response. They're on automatic pilot that they're saying it. So some people are really shallow people who are saying this cliche not because it's a profound wisdom to them, but just because it's something nice to say. So, how do you separate the people who are simply mouthing cliches, empty cliches, from the people who really mean it? How do you separate the person that says life is short, so treasure every moment, who's a bullshit artist, from the people who really mean it because they himself have experienced perhaps some kind of a tragic loss? How do you separate them out? The people who sound profound but are really just being cliched from the people who really are. How do you do it? How do you distinguish between the two of them? Well, one way you can distinguish it, I guess, is by listening to the person carefully, and by their body language, by the emotion that they put into what they're saying, you can intuit that they really mean it. Other times, however, when you're not listening to that person, when you are, say, reading what that person is saying, you're not actually seeing the person and physically seeing them, Well, you can't tell by their body language, or their expression, or the tremble, or the timbre of their voice. You really can't tell how sincere they are. You just have their words to go on, if they've written it. And the words sound cliched. So now you still have no basis for distinguishing. I think that this is one of the purposes of an artist, of a painter or a writer or a composer. I think that the artist is able to communicate a profoundly felt, experienced wisdom in their work of art, be it their writing, or be it their music, or be it their painting. They're able to communicate it in such a way that it doesn't sound cliched. That's the difference between an artist and a regular person. The artist has that ability. You read a book, for instance. I mean, let's face it, you will never experience, as I say, even with an artist, one will never experience to the same extent or in the same way whatever felt wisdom the artist had. You will never do that, even with a very talented artist. But you will get much more of a sense of that felt wisdom by listening to, say, a great piece of music or reading a great book. While you're reading the book, you will be, the artist will be sharing an experience with you. He will invite you to go on a journey with him. And you start the journey, and you go through all of the trials and tribulations during the journey, and by the end of the journey, the end of the book, you will have gotten, if it's successful, a very, very good sense of what that person has gone through. So a book, for instance, bridges the gap. A well-written, successful book by a very talented artist, sincere artist, will bridge the gap between a hollow cliche and truly felt wisdom. Now, let's take a book like The Death of Ivan Ilych by Leo Tolstoy, which is considered by many to be a great, great work of art. It's a novella. It's very short. It's about 70 or 80 pages. And it shows the transformation of a main character, Ivan Ilych, from an everyman, from the usual grasping, selfish, status-seeking, superficial person that most of us are, into a person with a person who becomes somehow cosmically enlightened in a way that almost all of us are not. Ivan Ilych suffers in the course of this novel. He's a judge, so he's a person with some degree of wealth and status. He's an upper middle class kind of person living very comfortably in 19th century Russian society. And one day he develops a pain in his side, and he consults doctors, and nobody can really explain what this pain is or cure him of it. It gets worse and worse. What is it? Is it cancer? Sounds like cancer, but nobody knows, and the pain just gets worse. And basically the story is the story of him becoming in more and more pain and having to, take a leave of absence from being a judge and just being in a sick bed. And as the pain becomes worse and worse, reviewing the course of his whole life up to that point, and trying to trying to make sense of it all. The only reason that Ivan Ilych even begins to think seriously about his shallow, superficial life up to that point is because of this physical pain that he has. I mean, Leo Tolstoy was very smart. He realizes that almost all human beings have very thick skulls, as thick as concrete. And it's very difficult for people to change in any way. It's very difficult for us to change our lives. And usually nothing short of intense physical suffering will do the trick. And in a way, this is what this woman in this podcast I referred to earlier is talking about. The only reason she changed or reevaluated her life is because of a physical illness, of intense physical discomfort that she was experiencing. Well, that's it. Nothing short of this kind of intense physical suffering will do the trick. I mean, we've all seen videos and movies and listened to people who really appear as if they've changed their entire lives because they now have terminal cancer. They're in severe pain. They've reevaluated their entire lives and they let go of a lot of bullshit. Nothing short of physical pain seems to do it for most of us. Some of us try to do it by meditation, by prayer, but who am I to say that it doesn't work that way? But for most of us, ordinary, superficial, shallow, grasping people, egotistical people, nothing's going to do it for us except for pain, physical pain. And Ivan Ilych, the character of Ivan Ilych has got to be, I mean, I haven't read that much, but I would imagine that of all the characters who have been written about, he seems to be the one that has experienced the most physical pain of all of them. His physical pain reaches such a great extreme that it enables him only at the very end of his life. Even at the very end of his life, he's such a blockhead. He still has so much. He's still so hard-headed that almost up to the very, very end of the novel, up to his very last hours on Earth, he's still the same kind of grasping person who's still trying to rationalize his former life. And it's only at the very end that he's able to break through to some kind of shattering sense of enlightenment. So Leo Tolstoy in this novella, because he was such a talented writer, is able to give us a hint, a whiff of this kind of a felt experience that Ivan Ilych goes through. Now, a lot of teachers and professors, academia, I've seen several videos, podcasts about this novel, The Death of Ivan Ilych, and they all seem to agree that we should read this novel because it will change our lives. There's one podcaster, I believe, whose title of his podcast praising this book, Ivan Ilych, it's Ivan Ilych died for us, or something like that. Okay, so in other words, reading this book is going to be a good thing for all of us, because it will show us the shallowness, because Tolstoy is showing us the shallowness of our lives. Ivan Ilych is kind of like an everyman, and what he goes through, well, we go through, and we should reach the same kind of enlightenment, change our lives in the same way that Ivan Ilych is. So it's a very, very valuable novel to read. It's a boon to us. It's a good thing, and so on and so forth. This is the usual cliched interpretation which is given to this novel. And I think that I disagree. The only reason that Ivan Ilych was able to come to his... at the end of the novel, Ivan Ilych is so enlightened. He understands life, whatever he understands. He understands it in such a profound way, so that he actually says at the end of his life, as he's just about to drop dead from this excruciating cancer or pain that he's experiencing, he says, "There is no death." And he says, "What joy." What's he talking about? That's a pretty heavy statement to make, right? There is no death. How did he come to that conclusion? Well, I don't think that even Leo Tolstoy can explain that one to us. The only reason that Ivan Ilych was able to make such a statement was due to physical pain that you and I can't even imagine. So when people say that, academics mostly say, read this book, it'll change your life, I say no, it won't. You want to have your life changed? You want to step out of your old shoes and step into new ones like Ivan Ilych did? Well, then you're probably going to have to experience unbearable pain, physical pain, to do so. Unbearable physical discomfort. And nobody wants to experience that. I don't want to experience that. Nobody wants to experience suffering and pain, physical and psychological torment, in order to get a new perspective on life. And you would have to do that to really change. So I think that these people don't know what they're talking about. That's the first thing. The second thing that all of these academics, these teachers, these podcasters who praise to the high heavens the death of Ivan Ilych, the second thing that these interpreters, these upbeat interpreters of the novel, I think don't really get, is that Ivan Ilych, at the end of this novel, at the end of the novel, Ivan Ilych reaches a kind of understanding of life. It's like the peace that passeth all understanding. He reaches that. And right at the moment that he reaches it, Tolstoy conveniently has him die. He dies off. How convenient, right? Well, what would have happened, I say to myself, if Ivan Ilych had not died? Let's say that he still has this peace that passeth all understanding, but he lives. He continues to live. What would have happened to him then? What kind of a person would Ivan Ilych have been then? Well, it seems to me that Ivan Ilych's wisdom that he's reached, in most cases when people who are in great physical pain get well or healed, or where they stop being in pain, whatever insights they've developed when they were in pain, they forget about them. They go back to their old ways again. Many times. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes this intense physical pain leaves such a mark on their lives so that it changes them even after they are cured or healthy again. So what would have happened to Ivan Ilych had he lived? If there had been an Ivan Ilych part two? What if Tolstoy had written a sequel called The Life of Ivan Ilyich, post his sickness? Well, it seems to me that Ivan Ilyich has reached such a profound understanding of life that he would no longer be able to live in civilized, polite society anymore. He would look back upon his old career as a judge and see how superficial it was, how status-driven it was, how it was driven by his desire to have a comfortable life, basically, and that's all, pretty much like the rest of us. And he would have realized the shallowness of that. It would have been unbearable to him in wake of his illness, and he would have never had the desire to return to his old career as a judge. He would have realized the hypocrisy, the craziness of trying to be a judge. Who is he to judge other people? He would have found that out too from his shattering experience. He would not have been interested in being a judge. He wouldn't have been interested in the institution of law, the legal profession. He would have seen the shallowness of it. Indeed, he would have seen the shallowness of all societal institutions at that point. He would have seen the shallowness at that point of all organized religions. I mean, all organized religions, in a way, they all seem to say, join our religion and follow our rules, and you'll lead a good life, you'll get closer to God, etc., etc. And then you have a guy like Ivan Ilyich who comes along and maybe taps a priest or a rabbi or a minister on the shoulder and says, no, you won't. Everything you're teaching your congregants is wrong. I reached it. I reached what you're trying to sell to your congregants, and I got it. And the way you're going about it is wrong. That's more than likely how he would react to religion. He would see the hypocrisy of all religious institutions as well. He would see the hypocrisy of all institutions, because all institutions in our society are based on the acquisition of power, of prestige, of money, sex, fame, all of that. He would want nothing more to do with it. The new, cured Ivan Ilyich. Ivan Ilyich would have nothing more to do with the institution of the family, because during his illness, he saw how shallow that institution is. I mean, after a while, his wife and his daughter were not really sympathetic to the intense suffering of Ivan Ilyich. They kind of resented it. They kind of saw it as a damper on their middle-class, comfortable lives. I mean, they just wanted to get on with their lives. His wife and his daughter wanted to mingle with society, go to the opera and so on. His daughter wanted to get married, to her boyfriend. And, this man in their house, this father and husband, suffering and shrieking in pain, that kind of puts a damper on all of that. So he kind of saw how resentful they secretly were of him and his pain. So he sees the shallowness of it. His friends, he sees the shallowness of friendship, because as he's dying, getting closer and closer to death, all of his so-called friends secretly, even though they express concern for him, are kind of vying and jockeying for his position that will be left vacant, his judgeship. Their friendship is rather shallow. They can't experience the kind of pain that he's going through. He understands that. So basically, all institutions, societal institutions, will be abhorrent to Ivan Ilych from that point on in life. He will become the ultimate outsider. He will want nothing to do with societal institutions, and societal institutions, for that matter, will want nothing more to do with him. Because to them, well, he'll just be a threat to them, to the well-functioning, well-oiled machine of all of these various institutions. I mean, no priest or rabbi or minister is going to want to have anything to do with an Ivan Ilych at all. The legal profession is not, nobody is going to want to have anything to do with this guy. Academia is not going to want to have anything to do with him. All of these fine professors and teachers who discuss books like The Death of Ivan Ilych, they're not going to want to have anything to do with him either, because Ivan Ilych is basically telling them, you're all full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. You want to really experience what I did? Well, you're going to have to suffer like I did. And all of your academic lectures to your students isn't worth a hill of beans. So all of the professors and teachers and scholastics and critics are going to want nothing to do with an Ivan Ilych. I mean, these people earn their living, pay their mortgages by discussing books like Ivan Ilych. That's how they make their money. That's how they advance in academia. And he's kind of putting a damper on them too. So they'll say, be gone, get out of here. In a way, I think that Ivan Ilych will kind of become, in light of his new insights into life, he'll kind of become like a 19th century Russian Timothy Leary. You remember Timothy Leary? Tune in, turn on, and drop out with his LSD credo. Well, Timothy Leary was considered a crackpot. Still is by most people. In my opinion, Timothy Leary had very, very profound things to say about the very nature of all these institutions. Very similar to how I envision Ivan Ilych post his illness. And what happened to Timothy Leary? Timothy Leary was basically vilified by everybody. He was just called a crackpot. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. The government put him in prison for several years on some trumped-up charges. I forgot what they were, because he smoked marijuana or something, smoked a joint or something. I mean, they were threatened. So that I think they put him. It's obvious that he was put in prison, not just because he was smoking weed or whatever it was, LSD, but they were threatened of a person like Timothy Leary. I believe this happened back in the 70s. You know, back in the 70s, there were a lot of young people, mostly young people, who were now suddenly taking acid, LSD. You went to San Francisco, a place like Haight-Ashbury, and every kid there was dropping acid. And they were all just the ones who had good trips. They all kind of realized the shallowness of societal institutions. Richard Nixon, the President of the United States then, was very, very alarmed by this turn of events. Richard Nixon was very much against LSD because, after all, you know, it really puts a damper on the well-oiled functioning of society. I mean, if somebody drops acid, and they sort of step out of society, such a person who doesn't really distinguish anymore their own ego from the universe, well, such a person it's going to be hard for a person like that to become a good, law-abiding, upstanding citizen, to become a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer, or to become a voter, or to be interested in politics, or to want to go to war, to want to volunteer to go to Vietnam. taking LSD and possibly discovering a kind of alternate reality in the way that Ivan Ilyich did is antithetical to the way society works. I mean, you can't have a bunch of people dropping acid all over the country, not obeying laws or rules anymore, just kind of giggling when somebody says, you can't do this. And the LSD, the acid head says, you can't do this? Who's you? Who's me? What is me? Is there a me which is different than the universe or something like that? You can't have this in society. You can't have anything else. The wheels of society, of polite society, are greased on ignorance, on superficiality, on stupidity. You don't want people waking up too much if you're the leader of a country or a politician or a lawmaker. You want obedient sheep. So you don't want people taking a drug that's going to open their eyes to anything. So Richard Nixon was very, very threatened by drugs, in particular LSD. And this is, I would wager, the reaction that everyone in Russia would have against a person like Ivan Ilyich, this 19th century Russian mystic. Ivan Ilyich would probably become an outcast. He would have to wander off into the desert. He would probably end up either being institutionalized, thrown into prison, so they could get rid of this crackpot mystic, or else he would have to wander off into the desert, or the steppes, I guess, in Russia, and live like a hermit in a cave. That's what would happen to Ivan Ilyich with his shattering knowledge. And I think that all of these academics and these cheerleaders for Ivan Ilyich don't really get that. So once again, I guess what I'm saying is, in order to change your life, you have to undergo some kind of radical suffering, either physical and/or emotional. And there's nothing short of it that's going to do it. Probably. As I say, meditation, Eastern meditation might do it. I mean, there are some people who claim that they've done it without this kind of intense suffering. Or maybe they haven't, I don't know. I'm not going to rule that possibility out. But for the most part, for almost all people, you're not going to change unless you're forced to change. And usually, the way that you're forced to change is by some kind of intense suffering, which is usually the result of a physical illness. So in conclusion, all I'm saying is this. I respect enormously what this woman was saying in her podcast, and I believe her, and I think it's for real, and I think of the same things myself sometimes. Probably not to the same extent she did, because I haven't undergone the kind of suffering that she has. But I respect it, and I honor it. But I sincerely have my doubts about whether such heartfelt wisdom can be communicated to other human beings. Thank you.